In a small village in Okinawa, there's a woman named Ushi. She's 104 years old. Every morning, she walks to her garden before sunrise, pulls up a few purple sweet potatoes, and starts her day with a bowl of soup that her grandmother used to make. The same soup, the same recipe, almost the same ingredients, for over 100 years. She's not an outlier. She's not a miracle. She's one of thousands of people in this part of Japan who are still gardening, cooking, and living independently well past their 100th birthday. And here's the part that should stop you in your tracks. Scientists have spent decades trying to figure out why. Not folklore. Not guesswork. Actual peer-reviewed research, blood work, cohort studies tracking tens of thousands of people for over a decade. And what they found wasn't one miracle food. It wasn't some secret pill. It was 18 ordinary ingredients, things you can probably buy at your local grocery store right now, working together every single day for an entire lifetime. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what they are, exactly how they work inside your body on a cellular level, and exactly how people 60 and older in Japan eat them every day. Some of this is going to surprise you. There's one ingredient on this list that's basically jelly made from a yam, and it's nicknamed the broom of the stomach. Stick around for that one. Let's get into it. Before we get to the foods themselves, you need to understand one concept, because it's going to come up again and again. This isn't really about any single nutrient. It's about a whole way of eating called washiku, and the secret weapon hiding inside it is something called hara-hachi bu. It's an old Okinawan habit of stopping eating when you're about 80% full. Not stuffed. Not starving. Just satisfied enough. Here's why that tiny habit matters more than people realize. When you consistently eat slightly less than full, your body shifts into a different operating mode. A pathway called an OR, think of it as your body's grow and build switch, gets turned down. And when that switch goes down, two other switches go up, AMPK and sirtuins, which you can think of as your body's clean up and repair crew. That's the whole game. Less build, more repair. And that one shift is connected to better insulin sensitivity, stronger mitochondria, and less internal damage from oxidative stress. Basically less rust building up in your cells over time. Now here's where it gets interesting. The traditional Okinawan diet doesn't just rely on portion size. The actual ratio of what's on the plate is unusual too. For every 1 part protein, there's roughly 10 parts carbohydrate. That sounds backwards if you've spent any time in modern fitness culture obsessing over protein. But this exact ratio is the same one researchers use in lab studies to extend lifespan in animals. So keep that number in your head. 1 to 10. Low protein, high carbohydrate, but the right kind of carbohydrate. Because every single food we're about to cover fits into that bigger picture. Alright. Let's start with a food that might be the single most studied superfood on this entire list. Natto. If you've spent any time researching Japanese longevity, you already know this one's coming. It's sticky, it's stringy, it smells strong, and a lot of Westerners can't get past the texture on their first try. But the data on this food is almost unfair to every other ingredient on this list. Natto is made by fermenting soybeans with a specific bacteria, and that fermentation process creates something remarkable. An enzyme called natto kinase. This enzyme can actually break down fibrin, which is the protein that forms blood clots. It also helps your body produce more of its own natural clot-dissolving compounds. But that's only half the story. The same fermentation also loads natto with an unusually concentrated form of vitamin K2. And K2 does something most people have never heard of. It tells calcium where to go. It activates proteins that pull calcium into your bones and out of your artery walls. So instead of calcium hardening your arteries, it's strengthening your skeleton. Now here's where the science gets serious. There's a long-term study out of Japan called the Takayama study. It followed over 29,000 adults for 16 years. People who ate the most natto had a 25% lower risk of dying from cardiovascular disease compared to people who ate the least. For death specifically from ischemic stroke, the risk was over 30% lower. A separate study, the JPHC study, tracked nearly 93,000 people for almost 15 years and found the same pattern. High fermented soy intake was linked to lower death rates overall, in both men and women. So how do people actually eat this? In most Japanese households, it's breakfast. You crack it open, add a little soy sauce and hot mustard, and then you whip it, vigorously, with chopsticks until it turns into this almost web-like, stretchy texture. Then it goes straight over a bowl of hot rice. And here's a detail almost nobody talks about. That stringy, slimy texture isn't just texture. It's a compound called gamma-PGA, and it actually helps your intestines absorb more calcium and magnesium. So the slime that puts people off is doing real, measurable work in your gut. Hashtag miso. Now, right next to natto on the longevity list is its cousin, miso. Different process, same soybean. Miso is made by inoculating soybeans with a mold called koji, then letting that mixture age, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. That long fermentation breaks soy proteins down into smaller, more absorbable peptides, and it converts plant compounds called isoflavones into a form your body can actually use efficiently. Here's the part that surprises people. Miso soup is salty. Like, genuinely salty. You'd expect that to be bad for blood pressure. But study after study shows miso doesn't carry the same cardiovascular risk as plain table salt. In one striking animal study using rats that are genetically prone to stroke, the group fed a miso-based diet survived significantly longer than the group fed the same amount of sodium from plain salt, and had far less brain hemorrhage and kidney damage. Something in the fermentation is protecting against the very thing salt is supposed to cause. Researchers think part of the answer is a class of compounds called melanoidins. They form during that long aging process and they act like little antioxidant sponges in your gut, mopping up damaging molecules before they can do harm. In Japan, miso soup isn't a special occasion food, it's daily. Often the first thing eaten in the morning, with tofu, seaweed, and whatever vegetables are in season, acting almost like a warm-up for the digestive system before the rest of the meal. Hashtag Shima tofu. And since we're already talking soy, there's a third member of this family that deserves its own spotlight. Okinawan island tofu, called Shima tofu. This isn't the soft tofu you're picturing. It's dense, firm, and made slightly differently. The raw soy milk is boiled before it's strained, and it's set using actual seawater minerals instead of standard coagulants. That small difference matters, because it means more of the beneficial soy fats and lecithin stay locked into the final tofu, fats your brain and liver can actually use. It's eaten daily across Okinawa, often raw with grated ginger, or stir-fried into the same kind of dish we'll talk about in a minute, shampuru. So that's 3 fermented and processed soy foods, 3 completely different roles. One for your blood, one for your gut and blood pressure, one for your brain and bones. And we've covered 3 of 18. Let's go to the ocean next. Here's a question worth sitting with for a second. Why do coastal Japanese populations, who eat seaweed almost every single day, have some of the lowest rates of cardiovascular disease on the planet? Hashtag Okinawa Mizuku. Let's start with one you've probably never heard of, mizuku, a slippery brown seaweed that's basically exclusive to Okinawa. It's loaded with a compound called fucoidan, a sulfated polysaccharide, which is a fancy way of saying it's a complex sugar molecule that talks directly to your immune system. Fucoidan binds to receptors on your immune cells and tells them to ramp up activity. More antibodies, more natural killer cell activity. In an actual randomized, placebo-controlled trial, healthy adults who took mizuku-derived fucoidan daily for 8 weeks showed a measurable increase in natural killer cell activity. These are the cells that hunt down infected or abnormal cells in your body, including early cancer cells. And here's the detail that scientists find genuinely interesting. Mizuku's fucoidan has a smaller molecular structure than the fucoidan found in other seaweeds like kombu or wakame. Smaller means it can actually pass through your intestinal wall intact and get into your bloodstream, instead of just sitting in your gut. That's a big deal for bioavailability. In Okinawa, it's traditionally served cold, dressed in vinegar, as an appetizer. Slippery, crunchy, refreshing. They even have a holiday for it. The 3rd Sunday of April is literally Mizuku Day. Hashtag wakame. Then there's wakame, the seaweed you've actually had if you've ever ordered seaweed salad at a sushi restaurant. Wakame contains something called fucoxanthin, and this one's mechanism is almost unbelievable if you care about metabolism. Fucoxanthin can switch on a protein in your fat cells called UCP1, which essentially makes your fat tissue burn energy as heat instead of storing it. It's one of the only known food compounds that does this in human-relevant studies. Large-scale studies on Japanese populations link regular wakame consumption to a meaningfully lower risk of dying from cardiovascular disease. And the way it's eaten couldn't be simpler: straight into miso soup, or sliced thin with cucumber and sesame oil as a daily side salad. #kombu. Then there's the seaweed that, honestly, holds the entire Japanese flavor system together: kombu. This thick, dark kelp is the backbone of dashi, the broth used in almost every traditional Japanese dish. It's an extraordinary source of iodine, which your thyroid needs to regulate your metabolism and body temperature. Here's something that genuinely surprised researchers. Japanese elders consume iodine in amounts that would normally be considered dangerously high by Western medical standards, sometimes 10 to 30 times the recommended daily intake. And yet, because of lifelong dietary adaptation, it doesn't cause the thyroid problems you'd expect. Their bodies have essentially adapted to use it safely, and some research suggests it's acting as a powerful antioxidant for blood vessels at these levels. Elders prepare kombu daily for dashi, simply soaking it in cold water, then slowly heating it to draw out its flavor, never boiling it hard, which would make it bitter. So in just this one section, you're looking at 3 sea vegetables doing 3 different jobs. One boosting your immune system, one helping burn visceral fat, one running your thyroid and protecting your blood vessels. And every single one of them is eaten daily, not occasionally. Now let's move from the ocean to the garden, because the next group might be the most surprising one yet. #Ayamurasaki, Okinawan purple sweet potato. Remember Ushi from the beginning of this video, pulling sweet potatoes out of her garden at sunrise? This is that potato, Ayamurasaki, the deep purple Okinawan sweet potato. And it's not purple for decoration. That color comes from anthocyanins, the same family of antioxidant compounds found in blueberries, but in a much sturdier form. Here's the detail most health content skips entirely. The anthocyanins in this purple sweet potato are chemically acylated, meaning they're bonded to extra acid molecules that make them far more heat-stable than blueberry anthocyanins. Translation: you can steam it, bake it, even fry it, and it holds onto its antioxidant power in a way berries simply can't. In lab studies using simple organism models, extracts from this potato extended lifespan by over 25%, and a fermented version extended it by closer to 40%, through a pathway connected to the same longevity genes researchers study in long-lived humans. But here's the number that really puts this in context. In the years following World War II, this single sweet potato supplied close to 70% of all daily calories in the traditional Okinawan diet. Not a garnish. Not a side dish. The main event. And that era lines up almost exactly with the historic explosion of centenarians in the region. #Goya, bitter melon. Next, the vegetable that defines Okinawan cooking more than almost anything else, Goya, or bitter melon. It looks like a warty cucumber and tastes intensely bitter, which is exactly why most people outside Japan have never touched it. But that bitterness is doing something specific. Goya contains compounds that activate AMPK, remember that repair crew switch from earlier, through a pathway that helps your muscles pull glucose out of your bloodstream more efficiently. It essentially mimics insulin without actually being insulin. And here's a detail that should make you sit up if you know anything about diabetes medication. The drug metformin lowers blood sugar partly by stressing your mitochondria. Goya activates the same energy pathway without that mitochondrial stress. It's getting a similar result through a gentler door. The signature dish is called Goya shampuru, sliced bitter melon stir-fried with firm tofu, eggs, and a little pork, and it's a defining meal across generations in Okinawan households. #Gobo, burdock root. Then there's a root vegetable most Western kitchens have never even seen, gobo, or burdock root. It's packed with a type of fiber that your stomach can't digest, so it travels all the way down to your colon, where it becomes food for your gut bacteria. One specific strain that thrives on this fiber, Ruminococcus bromii, produces a compound called butyrate, and butyrate is essentially fuel for the cells lining your colon. It keeps that lining strong, reduces inflammation, and is connected to lower rates of colorectal cancer in populations that eat high-fiber diets long-term. The classic preparation is Kanpira gobo, julienne burdock root, stir-fried with carrot in sesame oil, glazed with soy sauce and a touch of mirin. Simple, but it shows up on tables across Japan for a reason. #####Konnyaku, konjac jelly. And now, the one I promised you at the start of this video, the strangest entry on this entire list. Konnyaku. It's a firm, almost flavorless jelly made from a yam-like plant, and in Japan it's nicknamed inahuki, the broom of the stomach. Here's why. Konnyaku is made almost entirely of a fiber called glucomannan, which absorbs an enormous amount of water and swells up inside your stomach. As it expands, it physically traps fat and bile acids, slowing digestion and reducing blood sugar spikes after a meal. But the genuinely clever part is what happens next. Because it's trapped your bile acids, your liver has to make new bile acid to keep digestion running. And to make new bile, your liver has to pull cholesterol out of your bloodstream. So this flavorless jelly is, indirectly, forcing your body to lower its own cholesterol. It shows up in hot pots, simmered in dashi, or sliced into thin threads called shirataki noodles, which, by the way, you may have already seen marketed in the US as miracle noodles. ###shiso, perilla leaf. Last in this group, shiso, the purple or green leaf you've probably seen wrapped around sushi without realizing it does anything at all. Shiso leaves contain a compound called perolaldehyde, and it's specifically antimicrobial, strong enough to fight off bacteria that can live on raw fish. Which suddenly makes a lot of sense once you realize shiso is traditionally used as a wrapper for raw sashimi. It's not a garnish. It's food safety, built directly into the dish. It also contains rosmarinic acid, a polyphenol your liver uses to boost its own internal antioxidant defenses. And in a detail most people have never connected. When you crush or chew shiso, it releases a compound that can actually calm an overactive histamine response, which is why it's traditionally used to ease seasonal allergy symptoms. Red shiso is pickled with plums for color and preservation. Green shiso wrapped sashimi, gets folded into tempura, or steeped into tea. That's 6 more foods down, 12 to go, and we haven't even gotten to the part where dried fish flakes accidentally work like a natural sedative. Let's keep moving. ###katsuobushi, dried bonito flakes. Here's the fact I teased a few minutes ago. Katsuobushi, dried, smoked, fermented bonito tuna shaved into paper-thin flakes, is the backbone of dashi broth in almost every Japanese kitchen. It's loaded with compounds called anserine and carnosine, which act like internal buffers that reduce muscle fatigue and slow the formation of damage-causing compounds called ages, which build up in your tissues as you age. In a clinical trial on older adults with mild cognitive impairment, daily anserine and carnosine supplementation helped preserve cognitive function, and the effect was especially strong in people carrying a genetic risk factor for Alzheimer's. But here's the detail that sounds almost made up. The smoking process creates aromatic compounds that interact with GABA receptors in your brain, the same receptor system targeted by anti-anxiety medication. Just smelling katsuobushi while it's being prepared may have a mild calming effect. There's a traditional Okinawan restorative soup, kachuyu, that's just hot water poured directly over katsuobushi and miso, and it's been used for generations as a pick-me-up when someone's feeling run down, physically or mentally. ###soba, buckwheat noodles. Next, soba, thin noodles made from buckwheat, naturally gluten-free, and rich in a flavonoid called rutin, which strengthens the walls of your smallest blood vessels and improves blood flow. Meta-analyses pulling together multiple studies show buckwheat consumption measurably lowers blood sugar, cholesterol, and triglycerides. And here's a habit almost nobody outside Japan knows about. When soba is boiled, a lot of that rutin and those B vitamins leach straight into the cooking water. So at the end of a meal, elderly diners will often drink that cloudy noodle water, mixed with the leftover dipping sauce, specifically to not waste those nutrients. It's called sobayu, and it's basically built-in nutrient recycling. Soba is eaten weekly across most of Japan, and on New Year's Eve specifically as tashikoshi soba, noodles meant to symbolize a long, resilient life carrying into the next year. ###omebashi, pickled plums. Then there's omebashi, intensely sour, intensely salty pickled plums, traditionally placed in the center of a rice bowl so it looks like the Japanese flag. These plums are loaded with citric and malic acid, and the pickling process produces a unique compound called mumefuril, which has been shown in clinical trials to improve blood pressure and reduce blood viscosity, essentially helping blood cells move more smoothly through small vessels. There's also strong evidence linking regular umeboshi consumption to lower rates of chronic gastritis caused by H. pylori bacteria, the same bacteria responsible for most stomach ulcers. 1 plum a day, sitting quietly in a rice bowl, is doing more digestive defense work than it gets credit for. ###shikuwaza, Okinawan flat lemon. And rounding out this section, shikuwaza, a small, intensely fragrant citrus fruit unique to Okinawa. Its peel is rich in a compound called nobiletin, which is one of the few flavonoids that can actually cross into the brain. In a real double-blind clinical trial, elderly subjects taking a nobiletin-rich shikuwaza extract for 16 weeks showed measurable improvements in memory test scores. Separately, in animal models of Alzheimer's, nobiletin has been shown to protect neurons and reverse some learning deficits. And here's a detail that connects to something we'll talk about with matcha later. Nobiletin can actually bind to receptors that control your circadian clock genes, the internal genes that regulate your sleep-wake cycle. Which means this citrus fruit may be helping reset disrupted sleep patterns in older adults, not just protecting memory. Okinawan elders squeeze it straight over grilled fish and vegetables instead of using salt, or mix it into water as a daily refreshing drink. My take, the dancing mushroom, is packed with branched sugar molecules called beta-glucans that act almost like a training program for your immune system, activating receptors on immune cells without triggering the kind of inflammatory overreaction that can actually damage tissue. In diabetic mouse models, my take extract lowered blood sugar and insulin levels significantly. It's typically simmered into miso soup or added to hot pots in Japanese homes. Shiitake mushrooms contain a compound called aritatinine, which binds to bile acids in your gut and prevents them from being reabsorbed, forcing your liver to use up cholesterol making new bile, the exact same mechanism we saw with konnyaku jelly earlier. In animal studies, dietary shiitake lowered triglycerides by over 50%. There's also a hidden bonus here. When shiitake mushrooms are dried in direct sunlight, which is the traditional method in Japan, a compound in their cell walls converts into active vitamin D2. So a sun-dried mushroom is quietly delivering a bone-protecting vitamin that most plant foods simply don't have. And finally, matcha, shade-grown green tea, ground into a fine powder, and unlike steep tea, you're consuming the entire leaf, not just what dissolves into hot water. That means a much higher concentration of EGCG, a catechin linked to reduced neuroinflammation and protection against amyloid beta buildup, the same protein clusters associated with Alzheimer's disease. It also contains L-theanine, an amino acid that crosses into the brain and promotes a calm, focused mental state, while actually smoothing out the jittery edge that caffeine alone can cause. In a randomized, placebo-controlled trial, elderly subjects taking matcha daily for 12 weeks showed real improvements in cognitive test scores and reaction time on memory and attention tasks. It's consumed daily, whisked into hot water, sometimes alone, sometimes as part of a formal tea ceremony that's as much about slowing down and connecting with people as it is about the tea itself. And that brings us to 18. So here's what's actually going on, once you step back and look at all 18 of these together. None of them are doing just one thing. Natto isn't just heart healthy, it's also building bone density. Konnyaku isn't just a weird jelly noodle, it's quietly lowering cholesterol through the same mechanism as shiitake mushrooms. Shikuwaza isn't just a citrus drink, it might be resetting your sleep cycle while protecting your memory. And every single one of them is eaten constantly. Not as a supplement, not as an occasional treat. Daily, weekly, built directly into the structure of ordinary meals, the same way you might have toast for breakfast or pasta on a Tuesday. That's really the secret, if there is one. It's not that any single food on this list is magic. It's that an entire culture built a food system where these 18 things are simply, what's for dinner? Every day. For decades. For an entire lifetime. Ushi, the 104-year-old woman from the start of this video, never thought of her sweet potatoes or her miso soup as longevity superfoods. To her, it's just breakfast. It's just what her grandmother made. And that, more than any single nutrient we talked about today, might be the real lesson here. So now you know the 18 foods, but knowing what to eat is only half the picture. The real question is how to actually build a weekly routine around them without turning your kitchen into a science lab. That's exactly what I'm breaking down in Next Food, a simple, realistic weekly meal structure based on everything we just covered, so you can start eating like this starting this week, not someday. Click it now, it's right there on your screen. And I'll see you in the next one.